Hello and welcome back to The Marketing Hustle. In this podcast, I get to ask founders, CMOs and marketing directors all the questions about their marketing plans that I am desperate to know, and some questions about their career and how their stories have come to life. In today's episode, I sat down with Sandie Dilger, who is the CMO of Proper. So Proper runs two brands now, one called Eat Real and the other Proper Snacks. This used to be Proper Corn back in the day and was actually my first job out of P&G. I've spoken a lot about my wild, rewarding, really formative time at that business and how much it's meant to me in my career. And I was kind of desperate to find a reason to be able to go back to the business and understand how it's changed and what it's become. There is so much that is true today of the way Proper functions as that job I had when I was 24 and I'd fallen out of a P&G grad scheme, so confused and new to the world of startups. So I really hope you enjoy this episode as much as I did. Thank you for coming. I'm so excited to chat because I've spoken a lot about my time at Propercorn, which was so long ago, but I still see these products and feel so nostalgic. You know, I was there, I think I was 27 when I left, maybe? No, I must have been older than that, 28. So I did 4 years there when we moved from Propercorn to Proper.
Yeah, okay.
So that was my stint.
Yeah.
I joined when the business was in Tesco's and then left when it was in Sainsbury's, Asda, Morrison's. It felt like this massive growth period, but it was all just white space.
Yeah. And loads of people probably still there now that I work with, Ali and
people you work
Becky
with,
and,
exactly, who were such a big part of my life.
Yeah.
And also it was really where I learned, what the hell I'm doing. I learned my trade in that business.
Yeah.
And I've spoken a lot about how so much of my journey since then was kind of a response to coming into Propercorn, thinking I was the shit. I'd been hired in to be the commercial marketer I was the first commercial marketer, and this was in a day where budgets were so small that I was 3-4 years into a career at P&G and I was seen as this heavyweight.
Yeah.
Which it's quite a reflection on how much things have changed. But I came in thinking I knew how to do marketing because I'd been trained by this big business and realised that the startup world was just
it's a different world.
Yeah, I was I am so humbled. And the late nights I don't know whether the office is still like this. There was this dusty popcorn crust that used to settle. So because everyone would just be munching all day, there was this you could watch you'd blow and you could watch the tumbleweed across the empty desks. And I'd just be there late at night after night, just being I don't know how to do this. And then 3 years later, I really had found my rhythm and found ways of working with people who thought differently to me. It was the first time in my career that I'd encountered real diversity of opinion. Yeah. So Becky still there. Yeah. An absolutely phenomenal creative brain. I just kept showing her graphs and the poor girl was what? We were just not seeing eye to eye. Yeah. Until we broke through. So it was just such a formative time for me. So I'm really excited to hear what it's become.
Yeah, I know. It's really interesting.
You must have joined such a different company to...
Well, I think some of what you're talking about, though, is still so true because it's such a creatively led business. It was so hardwired into the sort of very foundings of it. And I think, Cass, the founder, would obviously sort of identify as a sort of creative marketer, I guess, if she was to have any sort of job title other than founder, and that sort of sense of creativity being so hardwired in. And I think we use these words like marketing, don't we, so broadly. I was thinking about it on my way here. Yeah. But actually, I think it is a real sort of the brand of marketing Proper is a very creatively driven marketing culture and a real sort of belief in the power of creativity. And we had that in-house creative team, creative agency before it was all the rage, which it obviously is now, and everybody's doing it because it saves money. But it was really hardwired into the way of going about the business, and almost this why would you get other people in external businesses to do things for you? Because it just makes so much sense to have that here, and people who know the business and really understand the context in which you're operating. And I think that was quite a lot of why they actually then came and hired somebody who probably didn't have the more traditional FMCG sort of path to CMO background, was because actually a huge part of my job is to manage the internal creative team and try and get the best out of them. And I think there's been quite a long time where people haven't necessarily always, or, you know, it's taken a while to like break through, as you say, where it's almost like, I think it's actually a really interesting thing for CMOs generally now, because a lot of CMOs inherit internal creative now and almost are like, oh, what do I do with this? I've never really had this before. And I think it's quite an interesting one in terms of like, how do you get the best out of the creative team when traditionally you used to just sort of outsource that to the agency, write a brief and then hope, you know, enjoy the meeting on a Friday afternoon or whatever. Yeah, exactly. Versus actually being much more sleeves rolled up in the creative process, which I guess I'm used to, and so I really enjoy it and have really enjoyed working in that way, and hopefully I think the team have as well. But it is quite different.
So there's a few things we should unpack in that, like both about your career and about the way Proper is set up. So I love the way you've described that as a creatively led marketing team. And firstly, just the recognition that comes with that, which is like marketing is this ridiculous one size fits all.
Yeah.
And you can have different brands of marketing. Every business has a very different brand of marketing. And I am like delighted to hear that Proper still has that very unique brand of marketing, which is very creative led.
Yeah.
One of the ways that comes to life is the in-house creative team.
Yeah.
You've been there like minus day one.
Yeah, exactly.
They're like as old as the business is young.
Founding members kind of.
Yeah. What are the other sort of tangible examples of how like you could see that particular type of marketing?
I think the way in which we turn up to the trade is something that we've always been incredibly proud of. So I guess when you are that smaller player and we're in a category where there is a huge, big, massive incumbent in PepsiCo, the focus on sort of driving a disproportionate share of attention in a meeting, they might have 2 days to present all of their brand plans to a customer. We might have an hour or 45 minutes, and thinking about how you make that really, really memorable, and how it becomes almost like a creative pitch as much as it is a sell-in is really important. And I think that was one of the real, and still is one of the advantages of having internal creative, because they're driving the sort of theatrics around the customer sales and the trade sell-in as much as they are almost the consumer piece. And I think our commercial director has been there a really long time and sort of really sees the value of turning up in a really creative fashion. And so therefore that's really part of it. So thinking about the impact that you can have in that really short space of time. And actually, again, through my creative agency background, that really plays to a strength of mine, because it's pitching, right? Like that's like, pure and simple, that's what it is. And if you think about all of like the agencies put on a really good show when you go in, you're one of 4 agencies pitching for a piece of business, you only have an hour, they've been seeing 3 different agencies over the course of the day, so you really have to be memorable and stand out, and be the one that they remember as like, oh, they're the guys who said blah, or whatever clever soundbite you can find. So again, that feels like it really plays to a strength.
That's a really nice example of it applied in a very like kind of, not like, I know the way you do it isn't mundane, but to a different business, that's just like a very run-of-the-mill process that you go into sales meetings and you sell. Yeah. But I'm smiling because I remember vividly doing tests in the office. We had this idea that we were going to suspend a bag of a new flavour under this like enormous helium balloon that was going to come out of a box in the office, and I'd completely forgotten about it until you started saying that, and I was just remembering all of these tests of the balloon being too big so that it just like flew up and hit, like basically burst on the ceiling, and then tests with a balloon like lacklusterly like emerged and it didn't work, and how to get the right size, and like the passion that was put into those moments. Is there an example of something you've done recently that like is fun and brings this to life?
Yeah, so we've recently pitched Merchant's Den at Asda, which is like their sort of version. They do like a Dragon's Den, basically, where suppliers come in and pitch for feature space and sort of, I guess, disproportionate support over and above what you would normally get. And it was for our cheese popcorn and new all the cheese chips. And again, you're thinking like, how are we going to stand out? What are we going to do? And the creative team came up with this really good idea where they were going to interrupt. So myself and Ali, the commercial director, were presenting, and they were going to interrupt it with this film that basically was like talking about a sort of cheese avalanche, essentially, that was like taking place in the room. And again, it is those kinds of things that people really remember.
Of course.
And just, I would say it sort of is in the DNA of the business. So the way that when we launch a new product, how we gift it to customers, to influencers, to opinion formers, those kinds of things. Again, the cheese thing that we've just done is connected to our new campaign, Practice Proper Snacking, which is sort of riffing off well-being and mindfulness. And so we've done this cheesy candle called Dreamy, with this beautiful box saying, "The universe loves you, it's brought you all the cheese." But again, it's just that sort of disproportionate emphasis on all those little things really mattering and making a big difference.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think but the customer meetings thing, we get that playback from customers all the time saying, "You're the meeting that I sort of look forward to most in the day." And actually that Merchant's Den, Ali will really thank me for saying it, that Merchant's Den pitch that we won was my first pitch that we won, but his third in a row. And again, that's, you know, it's worth so much value, literal value, in terms of kind of what the sales that you get out of it, but it also is just a lovely sort of momentum driver for the business, because we were sort of coming back from Leeds with like, yes, we've won, and you know, then it sort of tees it up for like a really big period, and it's sort of around now that it's all kicking off, and you know that it's coming, and you know that you can almost bank on that, on those kind of big sales figures. So it's really good.
It's like it's almost like the business of fun.
Yeah, I think. I mean, I don't know what office you worked in. It probably wasn't the one that we're in now, but I have like ex-agency people or people I know or people in my network or whatever, they might come and they always say, this place feels more like an agency than most creative agencies. And I think that's probably true now. Like the last 2 creative agencies I've worked in have been holding companies. And so therefore they're in those like big campuses in sea containers or whatever, and actually feel like slightly less personality and then you walk into our building and there is so much personality. And I think really understanding that stuff matters is so important, and that stuff matters to getting the right people, and it matters to how they feel, and it does matter to when you're pulling the late nights and all of those things, because it can be, you know, when you're trying to scale the business in the same way as we're trying to scale the business, it can be full on and relentless and feeling really busy, and therefore having all of those things that show that the brands really matter and that we really care about the people and the culture and the environment and all of that stuff is really important. I think sometimes we don't realise how lucky we are with that sort of investment in the culture of the business, and I think a lot of that comes again from that sort of creative mentality.
And let's just give some examples of that.
Yeah.
Do you still get free lunch every day?
We do. Not every day, because we're not in the office every day now.
Shocking.
So I guess we used to get, but we still have Ed, which this is like the best perk, because
because we need to say this isn't any free lunch.
No, so
that makes it sound like it's a sandwich platter.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's definitely not, and it's definitely not the sort of slightly tokenistic free breakfast thing that lots of companies offer.
Absolutely not.
It is like home cooked, unbelievably good vegetarian food. He's completely changed my view of what vegetarian food is like and how unbelievably delicious it is. You've got like 7 or 8 different things, each of them having about 25 ingredients as far as I can tell. We order all our food from Natura, so the quality is incredible and the sort of dedication to it is amazing. Ed, the chef, is just, he's just such a wonderful character, and he doesn't really follow recipes, he sort of makes it all up, but it's absolutely delicious. And we all actually sit, this is the bit that I think is amazing, is like that we don't have it at our desks, like never, and everyone sits in our sort of big bench seating. We have such a great amount of space in the office, and everyone sits and has lunch together and genuinely doesn't really talk shop over lunch. Like it is much more about what you've been up to for the weekend or where you're going on holidays or whatever, and it really is, it does like really build those teams in that big sort of communal seating. So yeah.
Do you still play George Michael?
We still play Careless Whisper. On my way here I was like, I can't remember the reason that we play Careless Whisper.
Neither can I.
But it's like...
and I was like 2 years into that tradition.
I can't remember why, but we do play Careless Whisper, and it is like Pavlov's dogs. Obviously now, sometimes I hear it when I'm not in the office, and I'm
And
like,
you're like,
lunchtime,
I'm so hungry.
amazing, great, where's the good food? Yes, we still play.
That's incredible.
George
and that
Michael,
was
Careless
inspired.
Whisper.
I can't remember the Careless Whisper reference, but the lunch experience is inspired by the Italian factory, if I remember this right.
Yeah, that's right. So
Cass
Cassandra,
went to-
our founder, was having a meeting, like quite a serious meeting with a supplier, and a bell rang or something like that. It wasn't Careless Whisper. A bell rang, and he was like, sorry, let me stop you there. Like, we're going and having lunch, and we all eat lunch together, etc. And she just loved it. And that big sort of communal tables, and everybody, I'm sure in a very animated Italian way, sitting and having lunch together. And she immediately sort of brought that back.
Yeah.
And, you know, it is those things that is a sort of investment in culture in the business that is the likes of which I probably haven't really ever seen.
No.
And that sort of commitment to constantly doing it as we've grown, and really sort of maintaining it. And genuinely, Cassandra's like a little bit of a sort of vigilante if she's seeing people not like for whatever reason on a call over lunchtime or whatever. She's like, come on, and you know, and it is really, it's a really, really good thing. And I think there's loads of good science behind it as well in terms of relationship building and collaboration, and how the more people you speak to at lunch, you know, just the easier. I've found it really good joining a business in terms of like how you sort of build relationships quickly by doing that stuff in a more informal way, rather than feeling like you need induction meetings with the whole commercial team or whatever.
It's fascinating, like the business benefit, like the concrete business benefit of something like that in terms of, like, if we're getting crude about it, like retention. Like you're mentioning so many people who were there on my first day.
Yeah.
Or I remember joining the business, and I've had like 3.5, you know, I've had like jobs, started businesses, moved around the world, all since then. And Ed and Becky are still there.
It's really,
and Anna Ali and a ton of others.
Yeah, and I think they would say it's changed, like, that they still feel like they're learning loads. And I guess that's the unbelievable thing about going on a journey. Like, we are not a startup and we're not a scale up anymore. We're a massive business now, like a really significant business. And we sometimes struggle to look at businesses that are sort of similar sizes. And I think sometimes people think, because of the story of the brand, people think of us maybe as smaller than we are, but we are. I was doing store visits yesterday as part of our retail safari, and you know, we're in every shop. Like we are relatively mainstream now, and sort of coming on that journey where we were so small, I suppose, and where everybody remembers getting the first listing in Google or whatever it was, to now it just being, as you said, like we're in every supermarket. On every high street, in every sort of bit of the country. I guess that must just be amazing for people to sort of look back and, and sort of see that they've like been on that journey and all of the different sort of learnings that they've gone through.
Oh, absolutely.
I think it's a really interesting thing for businesses that are in that sort of scale up mode is, you know, you talked about it, but the extent to which you bring in the kind of hardcore FMCG blue chip skills versus have the slight sort of misfits who've kind of grown up with the brands. And actually I think there is a good alchemy around trying to get that balance right, and not just become cookie cutter like the other bigger companies. I suppose if you're trying to beat them at their own game, then you can't just hire all the people who used to work there.
Well, no, but I think that's so interesting how we can say that as though that's the most obvious thing in the world. And yet a lot of the work I do is recruitment, and a lot of the briefs I get are hire me someone who's done this job before.
Yeah.
And then lo and behold, like do the maths, you end up with a team that feels like stale, the work they're delivering isn't cutting through, and it's pretty obvious why. So we can be like, of course, and yet it's a mistake that people walk into over and over again. So I want to hear, like, you're an amazing poster girl for this. Yeah. Like, you don't need the cookie cutter career. Yep. You can take some really interesting turns. Yeah. Tell me a bit about your journey and your transition from agency into a brand role.
So I started my career, I did a grad scheme at Cadbury, and I was there for 6.5, nearly 7 years. So did the, I suppose, typical blue chip FMCG, and like it's an amazing place to cut your teeth. Like, as you'll know from the P&G thing, you just learn all of the good sense of rigor. you know, that is, you're an assistant brand manager going around with all your performance data and you really understand where you're tracking and all of those kinds of things. And it's a great, like, rigorous place to come from and to learn. I was equally lucky in that the time I was at Cadbury, I think we were probably one of the more creative marketing companies in London, certainly, and we're winning sort of awards left, right and centre for drumming gorillas and dancing eyebrows and all of that kind of stuff. And again, I was so young in my career, but didn't quite realise that that was a really special sort of set of circumstances.
That
like
was
learning
a very
that
special
rigor
time.
and then having that unbelievable sense of creativity. And I always say, I think the thing that I loved the most was seeing the impact that creativity and sort of brand building, I guess, had actually on the organisation.
Yeah.
It just sort of walked taller because of the belief, actually, that we had sort of managed to find this like amazing formula where consumers were loving what had become quite a dusty brand by then, and they had, like, we had sort of refound the love for dairy milk in particular. And I just remember being like, this is amazing. Like, I've seen a transformation happen in this business, and the transformation is because essentially of creativity. And I want to go and do that more. I want to go and do that for loads of other businesses. So that was sort of my main driver of getting into, I worked in creative agencies, but in agency sort of strategy, I guess, which was, wow, if you can give people these amazing creative ideas that actually transform their businesses and therefore transform their relationship with their consumers, it's just an unbelievably energizing sort of moment. So that was why I moved to creative agencies. And so therefore, I suppose my method of doing it was predominantly through advertising, but not always, but through like giving companies big brand ideas. And I loved it. Like, I absolutely loved agency life. I loved the pace of it. It's pretty frantic. I loved the variety. 1 minute you're thinking about, you know, you're working in automotive, and the next you're working on spirits, and the next you're working on beer, and the next you're working on biscuits. It's just, you know, you get so much kind of breadth, which is, you just learn loads and learn loads about loads of different things. And yeah, I loved it. I love the people. I love the diversity of the people. And I think that that's an amazing thing about agencies. They get a lot of rap for it not being particularly diverse, but the sort of diversity of thought that comes from account people, planners, creatives all kind of coming together on a brief and getting to somewhere, I think is really amazing. And I love the sort of belief in, like, we can make it happen that happens in agency land. I think it's amazing. There's this sort of sense of like, oh wow, we've just sold something to a client, we've no idea how to do that, but it's fine, we'll find a way. And there's just this belief in making it happen, which is amazing. And I think kind of latterly, I suppose one of the things I've reflected on is like, there's something great about everybody kind of staying in their lane in agency side. Like, when you have that, like, a creative, a strategist and an account person who are sort of running at something, running at a pitch or at a particular account, it's really lovely because you've got that kind of collaborative, it's the three of you working to run something, but you each know how to make each other brilliant, which is really, really nice. But I suppose I always had that itch of like, I don't feel like I'm an advertising person through and through. I always feel like I'm a marketer or a creative marketer, and actually there was another like home for me back in away from Adland.
What was that missing? Like, what was the thing you were yearning for?
Getting asked the interesting questions. So getting asked, I mean, there is just an unfortunate truth that, you know, you're expensive. Often you get asked advertising questions because you're an advertising agency, but the sort of strategist in you is like, oh, I want to get asked the how can we fill our factory more, or, you know, some of the like quite interesting sort of strategic questions that actually applying creativity to can be really, really interesting.
Got it. But in an agency context, so many questions are just not yours.
So many questions are comms questions.
Don't get
They're
directed
not
at you.
yours. Yeah, exactly.
That's
and it's only when you scratch the surface and you kind of get in upstream and you're like, oh, that's so interesting. Or, and actually, so getting asked the really interesting kind of much more sort of problem solving-y questions, I suppose. And then, and just that sense of actually being able to apply your creativity to a sort of broader palette of stuff, I suppose, were both two real drivers for me to come back. But it's really interesting because I was really clear if I came back client side I wanted the thing I was going to struggle with, I thought, was the cultural change, like coming back into a much more sort of corporate environment. And it's really interesting because lots of, I think, ex-agency people go into sort of really startup type businesses where unfortunately you're still almost trying to like prove the value of marketing, and you become this kind of salesperson for marketing. Here's why it's important. And, you know, you're just like taking like Field and Vaness or Byron Sharp or whatever, like on a sort of roadshow around the business. And I was like, well, I really don't want to do that because I won't do well if I feel like I'm the only person who sort of believes. I need to go somewhere where there is a belief in brands and marketing and creativity as a sort of lever for growth. And then it'd be really nice if culturally it felt quite fun and sort of sleeves rolled up and all of those things that I really loved. So when this came knocking, I was like, oh my God, it's actually perfect.
It's like unreal.
It was just so perfect for me. And it's really kind of come true. So I suppose, thankfully, I guess we talk an awful lot, planners in particular, or strategists, talk a lot about how there's like so much applicability of our skills because it's really about sort of problem solving and asking the right questions and being really analytical and getting to the sort of framing different scenarios and making different strategic choices. And one of like my big relieves when I joined was actually being able to take that sort of critical thought, I suppose, that you learn as an agency strategist and apply it to loads of different problems and actually problems that you don't really know an awful lot about. So they could be innovation-based problems or supply chain-based problems or project management-based problems.
It's kind of be careful what you wish for. You sit in an agency saying, I really want the supply-based questions, and you turn up and you're like,
I don't know
supply?
what that is. But being able to almost actually fly at that sort of certain highs and be able to just ask the right questions or sort of talk about different scenarios without having that like really in-depth knowledge. And that's been a huge sort of, relief, but also it's like, it works. It's like you train your brain to be a critical thinker and being able to sort of have that bird's eye view on lots of different problems. And actually it works. And I think one of the big advantages that hopefully I've been able to bring is, you know, we always talk as a brand about looking to bring the outside in, not following the rules of the category, not becoming really myopically focused on what the competition is doing. And I think there is a sort of default position, unfortunately, sometimes as you scale, you do look at the category because you have the category data, and you do look at what the competition are doing, and you do look at the flavours that everyone's launching, and, you know, it does become, and when you get busy, the vision narrows a little bit. And I think I'm just a really, in a good way, can just bring, because I've worked on loads and loads of different categories, in loads of different bits of businesses, in loads of sizes of businesses, I can bring that sort of external perspective in, which I think has been really good. So the good sort of reflections are that it works. It's like the reasons I was hired in terms of those like problem solving skills, bringing the outside in, really understanding how to get the best out of creative people, actually is all working, which is really, really good. And then for me, I don't feel like a fish out of water because culturally it doesn't feel like a massive change for me. So that's
as
really
you say,
good.
it feels more like a creative agency than lots of creative agencies.
Exactly. So that's been extremely positive. Such a massive learning curve though, in terms of like moving from, I suppose one of the biggest learning curves is moving from my job being kind of purely strategically focused to how executional it is in a building like business, and how the CMO role isn't just sort of directing from on high, and how, you know, just how operational it is. And I guess I always said in creative agencies, one of the uncomfortable truths that I sort of recognised over time was the hardest thing about creativity, actually, I don't think is having good ideas. I think that's actually a relatively easy part. The hardest thing about it is making those ideas happen. And I still think that's, that's something I'm really sort of grappling with, is like that, just making stuff happen and getting it done and prioritising what you focus on. And sort of having that like executional impact feels really different to me, because for a really long time, I suppose my product was like PowerPoint. Pretty much.
And now it's like, if it's not in store, if a consumer doesn't see it,
yeah,
it's
exactly.
not worth,
exactly.
It's not literally not worth the slides it's written on.
Yeah.
In your old world, those slides did have value.
Slides did have value.
Well,
You won pitches, you won big bits
That's
of
what
business
you're paid
because
for.
of you, or you turned up at one of your clients and told this really compelling story about what it was that you were going to do for the brand, or brought all of that sort of stuff. And and now it's like, you've got to make it happen. So, and I guess that's one of the things, is the strategy part of any marketing job is actually probably like doing the strategic stuff of like, what do the brands stand for, and putting some discipline around them, which was a huge part of why I joined, and what was sort of needed when I joined. Because again, as you get brands who have sort of grown up through a startup and the scale up, there's a sort of intuitive sense of what the brands stand for, but maybe it's not always written down. And so that's what I sort of inherited, was a big piece of positioning work on both proper and real, around like, what is it that we stand for, and how do we sort of write the blueprint for our kind of challenger, for the 2 challenger brands that we've got. But that's relatively short. Like, you do that, it takes a couple of months, then you have lovely PowerPoint with all of that stuff, and then it's like, oh right, we got to go do it.
Yeah.
And that's been a really big learning curve for me, is just making it all happen. And suddenly, being like, oh, we need the factory to, like, all of the sort of operational stuff. Because I guess for a really long time, my product was people and work, as in there wasn't an actual product.
Yeah.
But that's been a really good thing as well, because it's allowed me, if you only have product and creativity, then you have to be really focused on, or if you only have people and creativity, you have to be really focused on people and creativity. And actually, in a good way, I think that has been my sort of default position, which is to come in and really focus on driving that through the people. But then you're like, oh yeah, we also have, product to get on shelves and all of that kind of stuff.
So, and retailers and all of that joy.
Retailers, supply chain, forecasts, accuracy, all of those fun and games.
Delightful stuff. So what advice would you have for someone who is in an agency and wants to make the move to brand side?
Yeah. What advice would I have? So I think
the way you tell that story is that you sort of just manifested it and said, gosh, wouldn't this be nice? And then you got a tap on the shoulder for the world's most perfect job.
I don't think I sort of manifested. So I took a break from agency life. So I wasn't working when, I was doing some consultancy work, but I wasn't working when this role arose. So it wasn't, and like, there is a sort of uncomfortable truth about it, that I'm not sure I ever would have got this role if I was working in agency life, because you are so focused. Like, I was doing a chief strategy officer role. It's a pretty big job. You are extremely focused on it. And I wasn't necessarily sort of playing with my head up, but I intentionally took some time to do some, I always say I did some strategy work on myself and on my career, and kind of like quite quickly got to, what do I want to do? And what are the sort of viable, interesting next paths for me, knowing that I want to take a break from sort of creative agency life. So it didn't just sort of come knocking, and I was, but in a good way, I guess I got to. I think it's really helpful to pick your industry, actually, and have a sense of where you want to go. I was really clear that, I guess, my background is in FMCG, in that I started at Cadbury. I'm a massively passionate foodie. I absolutely adore food brands. Food's like a hobby of mine. So I was really keen that that was the right industry, and that I had some sort of base levels of knowledge from my Cadbury experience to go back to as well. So I think that is quite helpful as well, is having a sense of what's the right place and where do you have some strengths. Because I had Cadbury background, basically every agency I ever worked on, whatever big FMCG client they had, they were like,
you got rolled out as the...
So I've worked on every beer brand basically under the sun, worked on Sipsmith, worked on McVitie's in my last agency. So I have quite a lot of that sort of latent knowledge. So that was quite helpful. And to be honest, if I hadn't got that, I think I probably would have felt too much that there was too many new things in my role. It was really helpful to just have that sort of basic understanding, and have been in lots of factories that make products and understand the way it works with retailers and those kinds of things. I don't think I could have gone necessarily and been a CMO in an automotive brand or a financial services brand or those kinds of things. So
Yes.
I think it is really helpful to have that sense of where are the places that you think you have strengths and passions that you can kind of bring to bear on it. So I think that's really helpful.
It's very important to acknowledge that, because we can talk about how it's important to create job opportunities for people that feel a bit transferable, and that's where amazing creativity comes from, and all of this benefit. But equally, from the point of view of the employer, and actually, as you say, really helpfully from the point of view of the individual, if you change everything, your uphill battle is so steep that you are just setting yourself up to fail.
Yeah, totally.
And the risk that you're asking a business to take, in, trust me, I'm a really fast learner, is so high that I think it's just like a really unfair request. And we were chatting before, and you were saying you get like a DM every day saying, how do you make the move from agency into brand? And I feel like we both probably have similar inboxes. I get a lot of like, what advice would you have for me if? And I so often want to say, like, you have to realise how hard a period of change is going to be if you're mixing up one or two variables.
Yeah.
Because any new job is incredibly difficult in the first 6 months.
Totally.
Any new environment, you're like trying to work out what the hell is going on, what is up and what is down.
Yeah.
Even if you move from like one biscuit brand to the biscuit brand next door, they will still feel like a seismic shift.
Yeah.
And so it's really important you don't like get disgruntled with the industry or set yourself up for fail by trying to change too much.
Yeah, so my old boss, I've worked for him a couple of times. I worked for McCabery and then I worked for him in an agency. He always talks about the jam in your donut and just like making sure that there's enough of the jam, which is like the stuff that like you know how to do and you're really good at and you love, and then the rest of the donut is like the new bits, or you might be sort of learning, etc. But it's really important that you don't end up with too much jam or too much donut, because otherwise the learning curve, as you say, is too steep. And so I suppose that's I guess going back to your question around the advice is like, really get a sense of like what it is that you're good at and where you can sort of add that value into a business, and being I think there's lots of different ways into sort of more like client side roles that can work to people's like whether it's that you're an account person or whether you're a creative or whether you're a designer or whatever it is. I think the in-housing of agencies thing now is a really big opportunity for people, because I think genuinely there are people going, oh, I don't quite know how to work, like how to get the best out of this in-housing. And I think creative agency people just naturally sort of know that. So I think there's a really good opportunity in that.
That's really good tangible advice, to look for stepping stones.
Yeah, totally. Look for stepping stones, maybe come in via the creative agency and then you can work your way back into brand management. Like there is a sort of uncomfortable truth, which is like, I don't think I would have got this job, and quite frankly, I don't think I could have done this job if I didn't sort of start at least with that client-side background in Cadbury, because I feel like I pull on that, even though I was 28, I think, when I left. I pull on that an awful lot, and I pull on that sort of muscle memory maybe more than I thought I would. But I suppose the really interesting thing, and this is probably a mistake I think I've made over the nearly year that I've been there, is you come with like a few, I suppose, limiting beliefs, I think we call them, where you kind of believe a few things about yourself, like as in, I'm like, well, I'm obviously not particularly commercial because I haven't managed a P&L for a really long time, and haven't had to be like poring over the finances of a business or anything like that for a long time. And so you come with this belief of like, oh, that could be the thing that sort of, I get like marked down a few points on or whatever when you join, and then you try to sort of slightly overcompensate in that area. And like genuinely, I found myself really like swassing up on like before we had a big commercial meeting, or when I had to do budgeting and things like that, just like really spending a huge amount of time really, really poring over it. And then actually you realise that you are spending the vast majority of your time learning how to be sort of average at something, that there are actually loads of people in the business who are better.
Just let it go.
I've got a CEO, a CFO, a commercial director. They're all going to know the numbers in the business better than I'm going to know the numbers in the business. It's not why I'm here. but it's interesting because you sort of, the stories you tell yourself around the things you need to learn to sort of round out your experience, when actually you like have to sort of keep retelling yourself, no, they hired me, they knew that I didn't have that commercial experience, they hired me to do only the things that I can do. And if I'm spending all my days doing the things that other people can do better than me just so that I don't feel exposed, that's probably not a good use of my time. And actually had a really good conversation with my boss where he was like, oh, I've never even, like, it's never even considered, like, it's never really entered my mind that you seem commercially weak or like you don't really know what's going on in the business on that, from that sort of side. And anyway, even if it did, it doesn't matter because like I know how to do that. And then I was like, oh yeah, okay, cool. Go and focus on the things that you can do really well and the reasons that they actually hired you. Yeah. I think sometimes that's just something to watch out for, is like you start compensating for your perceived weaknesses rather than really playing to your strengths.
Well, it's the theory of spikes. Like, we should be very spiky, and the best organisations are made up of lots of spiky people working together. And so your development areas are only things that you need to not get tripped up by. So you get good enough to be passable.
Exactly.
And then you stop.
Yeah, exactly.
And you put all of your effort into making your spikes bigger.
But that's not, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I think like, I completely and totally believe in that. And actually one of the reasons I left Cadbury was like, even at whatever, 6-7 years into my career, they're like, well, you're really good at the brand side of things, but you know, like you're maybe not commercial enough, or like go and do a job in revenue management or whatever. And I was like, no, I don't want to, I wouldn't like that.
Yeah.
And if I don't like it, then I'm not going to put my energy into it, and therefore I'm not going to be particularly good at it. And I'm a huge believer in like, you've got to have like the energy for what you're doing. And I was like, oh, that's really nice, because the creative agency world doesn't say, oh, you're a really good strategist, but you know what, you're kind of shit at production, so why don't you go and be a producer for a while? They don't do that. And so everybody, that's what I was saying earlier, people stay in their lane and they play to their strengths. But then it is interesting, isn't it? Because particularly I think in FMCG, and maybe it's changing a bit, is you have these roles like a head of brand role, where you're expected to like really understand a quite complicated creative comms landscape, but also be brilliant at the sort of innovation side of things, also be brilliant at sort of the trading, selling into Tesco side of things, really understand the financials. Like, it's a really, really big job. And one of the things I looked at as I looked at the team when I joined was, actually, I think we'd be better off having specialists in the team rather than those big generalists. So we've actually split the brand team now so that we have marketing managers and brand managers who are more responsible for the sort of innovation commercial side of things, who tend to come from that slightly more, I suppose, typical FMCG type background, and who have like a really, really good handle on the brand planning process and sort of operationalizing the brands, but then also having brilliant like comms experts who know how to build brands in a sort of modern way, and how to really be abreast of what's happening in wherever, TikTok, whatever it might be, the world of earned media, etc., so that we can really play to that strength. And I feel like that's a sort of weird, uncomfortable truth, isn't it, about like marketing career paths, is you're sort of taught that you need to do all of those things, but it's really hard to be good at all of those things.
Really hard.
Especially in a world now where I think particularly the comms landscape is just so much more complicated than maybe, I guess when I started it was like brief the agency on some telly and maybe a bit of print, and it was kind of okay. But it's so much more complicated now, and so much more like in-housing of creative, in-housing of content creation and all of those kinds of things, that like you really need to, that is such a skill set in and of itself, to then expect that person to be able to go and build an innovation plan and like be really commercially astute and all of those kinds of things is really like, it's a really big ask.
Well, I love this like recurring, there's like a recurring theme in everything you're talking about, which is like understanding what makes agencies work, which is a focus on expertise, a focus on really clear roles and responsibilities, and applying that into a brand.
Yeah.
And what that does is create real space. It's also a recognition of how like silly broad marketing has got.
Yeah.
and how challenging these individual jobs can be.
Yeah.
And like, it's such a logical conclusion for the way Proper has developed as a business. Like, they had an in-house creative agency definitely before there was words for an in-house creative agency.
Exactly.
We had Charlotte Gunn, who's the head of brand at Gales.
Yeah.
On the podcast recently, so this will be a few episodes back from when this airs, and she's been brought in to build the in-house creative agency at Gales, and that's really interesting. There are businesses, there's Adidas that have done it for ages, and Lego who have like their famous in-house creative agency, and then there are scale-ups
who are
taking this approach, and that's really interesting. But Proper have been doing it way before this was a white paper,
and not motivated by efficiencies. Maybe sort of out of necessity at the time, it became a sort of efficiency thing. But I don't think it was motivated by efficiencies. I think it was motivated by like, this just makes sense. Why on earth would you get external people to do this stuff?
I think it probably was efficiency, but in a beautifully holistic sense of the word.
Yeah.
Like when you say efficiency, you just think cost.
Cost, yes. Not
pure
motivated
cost.
From cost.
Not a bit of cost. And I definitely know that was part of it, because I definitely tried to push through some agency spend and got rightfully stonewalled. Like, in what world is this a good use of money? So it was a bit cost. It was also speed of ideation, the ability to do things quicker. Like, that's a huge part of efficiency. Efficiency in terms of growth. Like, I tell the story quite a lot because I'm sort of still haunted by it, of Cass and I in a meeting room having quite a showdown conversation where she said to me, loudly, in an impassionate way, you have to take a leap of faith and have trust in the power of creativity. And I was just I do spreadsheets. My brain has just melted at that statement. You can't tell me to take a leap of faith. That's standing outside a church and shouting, be religious at someone. It doesn't work like that. I don't have trust in the power of creativity. I don't understand what that means. But years later, I fully got it, which was we need incredibly efficient ways of driving earned media and scale and cut through in ways that are not mythical or kooky. This is pure commercial thinking, which is we have less budget than anyone else and we have to do more than everyone else.
Got to drive a disproportionate share of voice to get a disproportionate share of growth. And our growth targets are still the category's growing at, a couple of %, and ours are, 10 times that in terms of what we need to grow by. And so and you don't have the money and you don't have the share of voice. And so that sort of disproportionate focus on impact, and I just think that's so hardwired into the business. It's amazing how it was let's get in the hands of, we were doing influencer marketing before, again, there was a name for that. Let's get in the hands of people at Fashion Week and take loads of photos of it and put it all over our social channels. And let's make sure that the first listing that we get is in Google's offices, because those are sort of opinion formery type people who can talk about the product.
Yeah, it's amazing.
And so it's there was influencer marketing hardwired into the way. And I think that's an incredible testament to Cassandra, the founder, because it's just in her way of being.
It's a belief system.
Yeah, exactly.
That makes incredible sense however you cut it.
Yeah.
It just took me a few years to
and I think that's
to get my head around it.
Yeah, and now we also need that. We need the rigor and and the category stories and the spreadsheets and all of that kind of stuff, because we do. And I think there's particularly when we're a teenager type brand now and a big brand, there's only so far that the sort of foundational story of the business will get you. And I talked at our big company meeting in March about the coming of age story. So it's not the founding story, but it's the coming of age story. And what does that mean? And the coming of age story does involve having a brand on a page, which is these are the fundamentals of a brand. And it does involve having brand guidelines, and it does involve, trade toolkits and all of the things, I guess, that the bigger companies would have, but that it's a really important part of it. And what it shouldn't do is take away from all of those amazing sort of foundational principles of the business, and it doesn't, but there does need to be that sort of rigor in how a brand comes of age. And I think it is that if you can get that balance of intuition and rigor, right, it's really, it can be really, really powerful. But yeah, we do have guidelines and brands on pages, and that's all sort of new. And I suppose, again, the nice thing and the strategist in me is like, I get to like organize all of this stuff and sort of define the DNA of the brands, which has been really nice.
What's next for you on your like learning journey?
What's next? Oh my God, there's so much that's next. Like, I feel like I'm only getting started. I'm really excited to, we're about to sort of kick off, or we've just kicked off brand planning for 2026. And actually that will be the bit that gets to have my sort of fingerprints all over it, I think. That is one of the sort of differences, I guess, about like being in a business like this is we are fast and we're way faster than most of the competition, but there is still a sort of lag around when plans kind of come to life and making sure they get sold in and that you can make them and all of those things. So I think that's like a really key thing. We've just launched our new creative platform on Proper, which is called Practice Proper Snacking, and I feel like we've only scratched the surface of that, and we've sort of launched it in a quite sort of purist way of like, this is what it stands for, but just I think there can be so much fun that we can have with that, and actually do some more of those sort of tactics that we were talking about that are sort of more foundational to the brand. So that feels like really sort of fun and interesting. And then this guy is like what is my sort of second child, I guess, other than Proper, but Eat Real, I think. So the story of Eat Real is it sort of as when we became in our sort of most recent, we became Warp Snacks because we're private equity owned, and the two brands came together. And I think, we have had some teething problems in terms of what this brand is and how it looks and what it stands for and what its positioning is. And I think we've got to a really good place on it now, but it has involved, I think you wrote about it on your LinkedIn this week. It has involved quite a lot of like Emperor's New Clothes. I think that's packaging design number 3 in 3 years. So, but I genuinely believe we've got the fundamentals of it right now. And I think there are some really, I find it completely bonkers that this is stuff that we put in our mouths, that we eat, that we want to enjoy and love, and it is a category where like food values have gone to die. Very often it's so lacking in food values, whether that's flavor profiles or just even basic stuff like hardly anybody shows real food photography on their packs. So I think there's like loads and loads of opportunity in that sort of bringing of real food values into snacks, and I just don't really understand. I suppose one of the big things for me is I feel like there's a whole job that can be done around sort of celebrating snacking a bit more. I don't think, you'll see when you have your child. It's like it's such a one, like you give kids snacks. There's something so freeing in that. It's so permissible. Like you're literally told when you're weaning them that they need to have whatever number of meals a day and however number of snacks a day. And then some point in our lives, snacks become like associated with a loss of control or being a bit sort of like a dirty thing.
Well, then you get pregnant and they all come straight back.
And they all come back.
And that's a real silver lining. But I just think
it can be like a really, they can be a really good thing, and it can be quite a sort of nice moment of your day. And it doesn't always have to, you don't always have to feel shit after eating it, basically. No. So I think there's like lots that can be done around sort of celebrating snacking more generally, and it not necessarily being this bad thing because at some point we decided it was a bad thing. I think there's quite a lot that can be done on it.
Well, I did comment on the Eat Real rebrand because there have been a lot of them, and Ali was very quick in my WhatsApps to say the data is incredible, this one's really working, and I was like, I'm so pleased for you. there is no judgment here.
It's great that I saw him do that, and I was like, oh, it's amazing. Like he's being kind of evangelical about it, because it's like it's a tough sell to the sales team. So like, brilliant, let's go and sell another rebrand. But I think there is something about that of just acknowledging, actually, if you like, what we've done wasn't quite right for whatever reason, and wasn't, was probably rushed in the scheme of things and things like that, and actually being able to take a step back and go, do you know what, it wasn't right, and now we've put in the rigor to make sure that it is right, and made sure that we like really have spoken to our consumers, really properly identified the opportunity, and it is sort of quantified and all of that kind of stuff. So I think sometimes recognising
also,
where
like,
you've made a misstep and just being like, own it and
there are times
change.
you don't do a rebrand because you have high brand recall. There are times where you've done a rebrand, it's not quite landed, and you tweak again. And like always, a rebrand continues to evolve.
Yeah.
In like sometimes indeterminable ways, sometimes big ways. Like, it will never be that your work is done. And that's, like, I feel like I have to spend so much time explaining that to founders. Like, never look at an investment as like, this is the only time I'm investing in this for 10 years, because that's completely unrealistic. Yeah. And that doesn't mean that you've got it wrong. That just means like the market might have shifted. Or if you have, just like, that's fine. We just move through it.
Yeah, yeah, so right.
Final question. Who should I get on next? Who would you love to hear from? It could be a founder, a CMO, a marketing director. We're all ears.
I always think, so I actually don't know who this person would be, but I think Heinz have done the most amazing job in the last like 3 or 5 years. And I think it's so interesting because when I say, for example, join Cadbury, I'd have been like, ooh, Heinz, like why would anybody, you know, sort of established old-fashioned legacy brands. And I think the work that they've done around it has to be Heinz, but sort of ritualizing, like really celebrating the rituals around their products is amazing. I think they really, really understand that sort of consumer rituals, and then they just kind of go quite like interesting in the way that it's executed. And I think they're really, in a good way, a really busy brand, like loads and loads of stuff, all different kinds of shapes of different comms and things like that. But it all has a sort of thread back to it has to be Heinz. So I think they're a really good example. I don't know who the right person is.
I know. I need to find the right person, and then like who's their creative partner.
Well, they work with an agency called Rethink in Vancouver. I think they're in Vancouver, somewhere in Canada. But that's their sort of primary agency. And I don't know how much of it comes out of the US versus how much of it comes out of the UK. But they are a brand that I look at like the body of their work in the last few years and just think, yeah, they've really, and it's really nice to see like big legacy brands doing really nice creative things, and they will be on the Croisette in the next couple of weeks, I'm sure, picking up multiple awards because they do really nice stuff.
Absolutely. And it's a nice example of where that story could have gone so differently. Doesn't take much to imagine a very stale last 5 years.
No, well, that's what I mean. Like, it has to be Heinz. It's like, yeah, cool, okay. It's a sort of statement of superiority or whatever. And I think the flip is that's quite boring if it's the brand just saying that all the time. Whereas what they've done is almost they've got their use cases to essentially prove it.
Yeah.
And the fact that they just sort of celebrate how their consumers use their products, I think is just really smart. I think that's been a really interesting observation of mine, is maybe when I've gone to proper, I probably thought that we'd be closer to our consumers than we actually are. Because I think when you think about going somewhere relatively small, you're like, oh yeah, I'm sure it's really like, we're really close to consumers, really understanding what they're saying. And actually maybe less so because you don't really have an inside function or, you know, those kinds of things that you might have in bigger businesses. And I think it's really nice to see a big business like that being really focused on some of the way that their consumers are using their products, and you can just feel that they, I guess it's like all good comedians, isn't it? Great. I always say like really good comedians, they say the thing that's like immediately obvious but surprising at the same time. And I think that's what Heinz are doing about how we use their products, and it's sort of both immediately obvious but really nicely surprising at the same time. So I think there's a really good lesson there in terms of like close to the way that consumers use your products and those sort of rituals, and how you can just put them at the forefront of how you build a brand.
Beautiful example.
Oh, there you go.
I'm going to try and find the person.
I don't know who the person is. Yeah, I'm like, who is that person? It's a great job.
I'll send some DMs into the universe, and someone will, as often is the case, someone replies and says, it's not me, it's this person you need.
It's this person, yeah.
Thank you so much
Thanks
for coming
so
on.
much for having me.
Thank you so much for listening. This is the last episode in our series with CMOs and marketing directors for now. We've been airing these episodes as I've been off on maternity leave, raising my first child, and we're going to be back next with another series of conversations focused on parenthood and the balance between being a parent and working life. So I'm going to be interviewing marketing directors, founders and CMOs, same audience, but to take a very different approach and get into just what it's like to balance both things at once. Please do subscribe wherever you listen to your podcasts so you can stay in touch with what's coming next, and do DM me if there's a topic, a conversational angle that you'd like to hear.